Do you remember as a kid, being a kid and being asked or more likely told, you need to say you're sorry, and responding by saying you're sorry, but with a, I'm sorry. Sorry. And, all the adults never believing you. You never got off the hook with that, because we all know that it's not just what we say, but how we say it.
Love you.
Wow. Love you too. That's what we're talking about today. Tone of voice.
We're Elisa and Brian Hope, and with a lot of years being a mental health therapist,
And a lot of years being a pastor.
and even more years being married, we have hopes for your marriage.
Here we go. I remember in college I took a bunch of communication classes. I was a communication major, which meant a lot of talking and some listening.
Hopefully some listening.
Good active listening, reflective listening, things like that.
Last 2 episodes.
But one of the things I remember is when we started discussing and learning about nonverbal communication and how much it matters, that it struck me that I always thought it was like, of course there's nonverbal communication, but I didn't really realize how much weight it carried in communicating and having people really believe what was being communicated. If when it comes down to it, we will always choose to believe somebody based more on how it is said than on what is said. It just carries that much weight.
Yeah, so you can see how we might get into trouble with this issue. Especially think about all the things on like texting and emailing. Like, we don't have this, like, how's it being said? What emoji did they use?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. What punctuation? But how it happens in marriage too. Boy, that's a big miss, that we are reading so much more than just the words that are getting said. So we get ourselves into a lot of trouble, and we boiled it down into 3 main areas that
Big ruts
that
we get stuck in.
that we think are worth paying attention to. One is that we get into a default mode of just not paying attention to how we're saying what we're saying. So we just don't notice. We're kind of in our own world, or we're in our own head, whatever it might be, and we don't notice the tone of voice. The other thing that we see a lot, even in our own marriage, is how easy it is to load the emotions from a different situation or a different experience onto what we're saying. So what we feel is coming through, but it's not connected to what we're saying or to our spouse receiving it. It's connected to something that happened earlier or something that we're thinking about.
For example, coming in from the garage, working on a project that isn't going very well, as they tend to do, and walking out of the garage into the living room, into a conversation with your spouse, and carrying from the garage all that frustration into a point of communication or a conversation that has nothing to do with that situation, but everything I say having all the feelings of garage instead of being about the next conversation.
Happens all the time.
Happens all the time.
Every day for both of us. I think for all of us. So easy to do. The third one, this is kind of an ugly one that we don't want to look at, but we are aware that tone of voice does carry a lot of weight, and we use that kind of in a manipulative way. So we can say something, and then what we're communicating through our tone of voice is something very different. And then if our spouse asks us about it, like, well, you said you're fine, but you didn't sound fine, we can kind of justify it and actually even deflect and put it back on them and say, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, we can get kind of ugly with like, you're reading into things, or I didn't say that. And I have to say, I've done that before, and I'm sorry.
I forgive you. I've done it.
Yeah, but it's really easy to just like be really short and kind of hope that your spouse even picks up on it, because you don't actually want to address what is really going on.
It's like off record stuff. So on the record, you said what the right things, but off the record, your tone of voice said something different, and that's what you really wanted to communicate. You wanted to communicate frustration, disappointment, but you said the right things, and then we can feel off the hook because, well, on record I said the right things.
It gets muddy really fast.
It gets really ugly and unhealthy and unhelpful. So instead of those ruts, we want to give you a few things to help get out of those ruts and establish some healthy habits and rhythms for communicating fully with your tone of voice. Number one is what we are calling NJN. She's laughing because I just made this up this morning. Non-judgmental noticing.
You might hear that again.
You're going to hear that idea. Because it's one thing to notice things about yourself, but if we do that and immediately are hard on ourselves or get judgmental on ourselves,
shuts it down.
We just shut ourselves down and we will never move forward. Yeah. So notice in the most non-judgy way you can your own tendencies about what people hear from you or how they respond to you in those communications, especially your spouse. Take a minute and just notice some of those things. The other thing is to take a bit of a breath. I mean, not even metaphorically. Like
take a breath.
Breathe through your nose, keeps the mouth closed. When moving from one situation to another so that you don't conflate or muddy a communication opportunity with your spouse with a situation that you're walking out of or maybe looking forward to later in the day. So just take a breath and recognize what you might be bringing into an immediate time of communication from something that's rather unrelated.
Yeah, and just name it. You don't have to solve anything right then. But just to put words to it is really helpful for your heart and for your spouse's heart to know what is actually going on.
To just say, I'm really frustrated because my
stupid carburetors.
Stupid carburetors won't come out.
Not frustrated with you, even though it sounds like it.
It sounds like it.
All the nonverbals say frustration. Well, might as well just say what you're frustrated with.
I'm frustrated about these things. And finally, we just build a habit of being honest with yourself and with your spouse.
It goes a long ways. Just honesty. Because through our tone of voice, we can do so much good. This is the bottom line, is tone of voice. We want it to align with our hearts. And we want to be able to communicate to our spouse. Like the big objective is communicating through what we're saying and how we're saying it, who they are and who they are as defined by God, that they are beautifully and wonderfully made and that they're worthy of respect and they're worthy of cherishing and they're worthy of honest communication. And so through tone of voice, we get to give them that gift of being that reflection of who God sees them to be, has made them to be, and hopefully how we see them to be and what we want them to hear from us. More than just our words, our hearts.
I want my wife to believe that I believe she's my most important person. And you want your husband to believe that you believe I'm your most important person and that I value you so much that you are my treasure. And that's not going to happen with just what you say. When you combine it with how you say it, that's when we really believe it sinks deep into our heart. We say what we mean and we mean what we say, and we align our hearts. Like Elisa said, we wanted to have the full weight of truth behind what we communicate, because that's how God communicates with us. He says a lot of things. There's a lot of words in the Word, but it's all backed with this, if you will, a tone of voice that assures us that He really does love us. He really does value us. He's really not just overly frustrated all the time because His tone of voice is kind and steadfast in His love and patient. So we want to receive that from Him and give that to our spouse.
We hope that you hear that good word from God today for your heart and soul, and you're able to give that good word to your spouse.
See you next time.